Did you know that more than 60% of candidates selected for IAS in 2016 were from Delhi? What could be the reasons for this? Delhi gives you access to the most renowned teachers of the country, gives you exposure to quality content and rigorous assessment, and most importantly, provides an opportunity for interactive learning. Does that mean shifting to Delhi is the only option to succeed in the IAS exams? What about those who have a full-time job and cannot quit it for preparation?
Would you like to say something in the beginning? No? Right. Once again, good morning to you and welcome to this session. You see, इसको यहाँ रखिए. You see, the purpose of this session, basically, a session to give you in-depth kind of knowledge and critical thinking capacity to deal with case studies. So, purpose of today's consultation, I would be happy if you make it interactive to discuss the dynamics of case studies and how you should deal with these case studies. For a bureaucrat, every day in professional life is a day of several case studies. Okay? And keeping that in view, what really is expected of you is capacity to apply what you might call practical ethics for this civil service. Okay? And the practical ethics must be understood in the background that you're not just a civil servant, you will be part of the elite cadres of the civil service. The responsibilities of the elite cadre are very much different from the responsibilities and the duties discharged by what you call the subordinate staff of the government. So these two facts must be borne in mind, that you are thinking as a member of the elite cadres of the civil service under the government of India, not under the state government. There's a huge difference. And therefore, your ethics, your ideas of what is good and what is not so good, what is proper and what is not proper, what is appropriate and what is not appropriate, will be materially different from others. Now, before I go into it, let me just mention briefly that civil service is different from other professions in one very distinct way. What is that? Could you please tell me? You have all done your prelims and all. Could you just tell me, what is your perception of the uniqueness of the duties of a higher civil service officer, as distinct from, say, men in the armed forces, people in medical, engineering, or other professions? One basic point of difference. Pardon me? Okay, that is the character of the professionals. What is the specific duty? Oh, it's a philosophical answer. Very good, but it's philosophical. Agents of change.
Maintaining law and order. Maintaining law and order. Policy implementation.
Okay, and if I put it simply, what distinguishes civil service from other professions is that you will be exercising power under various statutes over other citizens. Any difference of opinion on this? All these are fine. Agents of change, service to the people. I would like to give back to the society what I have, been indebted to. All these are fine. But under the Code of Criminal Procedure, you have to exercise certain powers as a magistrate. Under the Income Tax Act, you have to exercise certain powers. Under Excise Act, under any act. So primarily, take it from me, the main duty of a civil servant is to exercise powers under various statutes conferred on him or her under this statute and exercisable by her in her own rights and by application of your own mind, your own judgment. And it is not enough that you form a judgment. Your order should not be cryptic. Emperor Akbar might have the luxury of issuing a cryptic order for others to interpret and put it down. But as a civil servant, you have to be under obligation to deliver what is called speaking orders. Means whatever decisions you take, it should be put down in writing. It should be based on reason, facts. And your decision must be just and fair. And not only that, it should appear to be just and fair to all other members of the public. Because it is a public document. The moment you issue an order, it's a public document. Why it is public document? Because anybody who is aggrieved by this order has the right to prefer an appeal before your order. So here, really, ethics comes in. This is precisely what I call practical ethics, that a civil servant has to imbibe, develop, cultivate, to be able to discharge his duties in a just and fair manner. Okay? Is that clear? Any doubt on this? Okay? Very clear? See, now, you have gone through the theories of justice of John Rawls. You have read Aristotle, you have read Plato or whatever. The word justice. What does the word justice mean? Okay? Can you tell me, what does the word justice really mean? You see, it is a Latin word. The word jus in Latin means to tie up. To tie, okay? Now, this word is significant because it suggests a balancing act. Don't you agree? Justice means you balance the facts, this side and that side, and come to a reasoned conclusion. That is what justice is. And it is important because the definition of justice in India somehow, in Indian English, has a limited meaning. Judges only deliver justice. No. Judges do what you call adjudication. Okay? But justice is a much broader concept. It includes every aspect of life. Therefore, the term administrative justice is extremely important for civil servants to understand. What is administrative justice? In other words, whatever decision you take, whether it is a matter of granting admission to children in a school or grant of tax relief to a charitable organization, whatever you do, there has to be an element of justice to justify your action, the rationale of your action. So, justice is a comprehensive term. So, when you distribute seeds and fertilizers to flood-affected people, suppose there is a special program only for flood-affected people, justice demands that this dispensation should not go to people who are not affected by floods. Okay? It's meant for flood-affected people. Then there are guidelines which should be taken as the yardsticks of taking a decision, the grounds for what you call a just and fair decision. These guidelines would vary. A widow, a female head of a family, should be given a preference. So that is what you call justice, backed up by fairness. So therefore, one must appreciate the idea of justice in a pretty broad manner. Whatever action you do must have an element of strong justice, elements of strong justice and fairness. So when you see a case study question, first go through it and identify the points of action which require application of the concept of justice. Okay? Now we come to the word ethics. You all know that it's a mix of two Greek and Latin words, ethike and ethice. Together, ethics means science of morals. Now, science of morals is a broad subject. It may have, in fact, religious connotations. In some societies, in some faiths, certain things are considered absolutely essential, imperative. But if you look at it from administrative point of view, it boils down to a code of conduct. You see? Now, this code of conduct, the idea of a code of conduct is not new. It has been as old as the idea of state itself. And therefore, you have the Central Civil Service conduct rules, discipline and appeal rules. Together, you might say that these codes constitute the ethical basis of functioning of the civil servant. Okay? Now, if you go through any of these codes, you find that there are a lot of things, do's and don'ts. Basically, it's a mix of do's and don'ts. Fine. But what are these fundamental do's? And what are the things which must be avoided? These are pretty well known. But it will be useful to just think of what Pharaoh Ramesses I of Egypt, thousands of years ago, he laid down a code of conduct in a few lines, which actually sum up practical ethics. Let me just quote from the edict of the Egyptian Pharaoh, Ramesses I. Why is it important? Because Egyptian state is probably the first organized state of human history. Because state as an institution is built on two other institutions. One is family. The other is settled agriculture. Settled agriculture and family created a lot of ties, which led to creation of the Egyptian state. Let me just read for you. Be courteous, tactful, as well as honest and diligent. All your doings are publicly known and must therefore be beyond complaint or criticism. Be absolutely impartial. Always give a reason for refusing a plea. Complainants like a kindly hearing even more than a successful plea. Preserve dignity, but avoid inspiring fear. Be an artist in words, that you may be strong, for the tongue is a sword. Unquote. What do you think of this? Isn't it comprehensive? Absolutely comprehensive. Okay? Now, the most important thing is that a kindly hearing even more than a successful plea. People would like to get a patient hearing. One would always have in his mind a possibility that his plea might be rejected. But the fact that you have given a patient hearing is enough. Courteous, And more important thing, all your doings are known. Because the civil servant lives under the glare of the public. Whatever you do, the clubs you visit, the clubs where you play tennis or do whatever, everything is known to the people. Because by virtue of your position, a civil servant has to be very careful in his personal conduct. But more importantly, one has to be an artist in words. The fact that reason is emphasized and artistry in words are also emphasized means that your orders must be clear, logical, and absolutely dependable, fair and just, right? So, now if we apply these principles to state, you come across the word politia. The politics derived from the word polity. It's a Roman word which means the state. Interestingly, the word polis, P-O-L-I-S, is a Greek word. It refers to Greek city-state. Now, the Greek words are very interesting. And the Greeks have a great faith in the idea of state. For instance, the word idiot is commonly known. What is the origin of this word idiot? It is derived from a Greek word, idiousia, which means a person who does not take interest in the affairs of the polis. A man who does not take interest in the affairs of the community, political community, or the organized community, is what an idiot was all about. But the meaning of this word has changed over the years. If we apply the Greek definition, a lot of people in India would be put in this category. Isn't it? How many? So, now we come to the basic fact that a political thinker like David Aston emphasized is that it is essentially provisioning of various services which constitute the basic function of a political society called the state. So here you come to the concept of provisioning. Who is to provide these services, including delivery of justice, is how laws and rules came, and the machinery, the instrument to enforce these laws and rules. Here, the idea of justice comes in. How do you define justice? Now, when you deal with a case study of, say, dealing with all kinds of problems, beginning from communal tension to dealing with flood-affected people, erosion-affected people, natural calamities, where child rights are violated, etc. Here, there are two concepts which are to be borne in mind. One is that state is an ethical state. India is an ethical state. Look at the preamble of the constitutions of India. Number two, state is also an interventionist state. State intervenes. It has a role to provide justice. Third point is that it has to have a vision of progress. That is embodied in the constitution. But it was summed up by Amartya Sen brilliantly in his concept of entitlements. Everybody is entitled to certain basic rights and services. On this basis, he conceptualized the idea of what is called capability enhancement of the people, regardless of their caste, creed, or whatever, as the primary object of the state. Now, whether the state has succeeded or not is reflected in the United Nations Human Development Report. In other words, a constant drive to enhance the capabilities of the people is the object of an interventionist progressive state. Okay? Now, this includes a whole range of issues like gender justice, child rights, protection against sexual harassment, freedom of speech, right to dissent, right to form an association. Now, take for instance China. In the Chinese constitution, right of freedom of speech is there, but there is no right to form an association, or which means a political party. Therefore, you cannot say that China is a modern state in the true sense of the term, right? Now, according to many thinkers, a rights-based social order is what one should try to achieve. Now, these are pretty well known to you because state as an institution, the Aristotle argued, is the noblest of all associations. And its object is happiness of the people, attainment of happiness for all. This being the basic object of state, you have to have a social order that meets the objects of the state. It may not be easy to achieve it. It may be a long drawn-out process, but it's a kind of a vision or an ideal that a state must place before itself. And when you deal with the case studies, you have to bear in mind these fundamental bases of the Constitution and the vision of this country. The Prime Minister has been talking about daily to develop India. You see, all these are subsumed in these concepts. Now finally, the idea of equity and equality and justice is pretty complex in some ways because its practical application will entail resolving certain issues like people remaining backward for centuries for certain constraints beyond their control. However, one must be aware of the idea of John Rawls. He argued that there are certain primary rights and there are certain secondary rights. Now, the primary rights are sacrosanct. The secondary rights must be enforced by a fair mix of policies and administrative actions. And a major part of this action is adoption of a participatory approach to development. That is, those who are stakeholders must have a say in developing programs for their welfare and implementing it and in evaluating this also. In other words, this is what you call accountability. Now, I have tried to give you a framework, and mind you, in case studies, you have very little time, to write. So you must read the paragraph carefully and then note down the action points, justice points, ethics points, and then quickly write your response. But mind you, there is always a core issue which is camouflaged by certain other issues. You have to find out the core issue immediately and then address the core issue in your reply. And your reply should be clear and cogent. It is not ye bhi ho sakta hai, no, not that. You have to just say this, in my considered view, is the answer, is the action that I should take, or the person concerned, or the designation that is mentioned should do in such situation. Okay? Now, I was thinking aloud rather some of these issues, and I thought in the last 2 weeks or so, several interesting developments had taken place. And I have briefly summed up these developments and the issues inherent in this, which I placed before you. Some of these pertain to very important issues. I won't talk about all these 6 issues, but let me talk about the 7th issue, which has just been made known to the whole country. The Chief Minister of West Bengal, having been highly sensitive to communal problems and having been very keen to avoid any communal disturbances, passed an order that after Vijaya Dasami, the immersion ceremony, immersion that we do, should be postponed. Now, a public interest litigation was filed before the High Court. Ordinarily, this is a matter for the state government to decide. Law and order is a state subject. It is not that it is the first time that Muharram and Durga Puja are taking place about the same time. This is not the first time. It has been happening for centuries. And the government had enough, what you call, institutional memory to deal with such problems. Okay? Why was it necessary for the state government to take an extraordinary decision? And the matter went to the High Court. Question that you might ask, is this a case of judicial overreach? Or is this a case of executives trying to escape their responsibility? Now, after a quick hearing, the Honorable High Court passed an order directing the state government to see that everything goes out peacefully and there is no need to implement the order. The order has been set aside. Now, this is, to my mind, a unique case. So like this, there are several other cases. I'll just mention the first case, which I feel is essential for every aspiring civil servant to understand. The former Minister of Environment is facing a charge, as we have read in the paper. The charge was that she, in her capacity as the Union Minister for Forest and Environment, had allowed transfer of forest land for non-forest use, overruling the objections of the officials. In this particular case, there is a Forest Advisory Committee, which is a statutory body, headed by the Director General Forest in the Government of India. As per the rules made under the Forest Conservation Act, the Forest Advisory Committee has to look into this matter, examine the feasibility of the proposal, and its recommendation is mandatory. In this particular case, it seems that even though this case was earlier rejected by the previous minister in charge of Forest and Environment, the concerned minister had called up the file, overruled the objections of the Director General Forest. And the objection was pretty simple, that it was earlier rejected by the former minister. It has to go to the Forest Advisory Committee. And the committee has to take a view on this matter. And on that basis, the minister has to decide. Now, this obviously is a case of, it appears to be a case of arbitrary decision. Now, what is the message for you? The message is, law is supreme. Law is supreme. Law protects an official, not an individual. Third is, nobody is above the law, and nobody is below the law also. This is often forgotten. Next point is that a civil servant like Director General Forest is exercising power conferred on her or him under the Act. This power cannot be taken away by anybody. This is very important. So, violation of a statutory order is violation. It is immaterial who commits the violation. That is important. In other words, law is supreme. So, you will come across in the UPSC, there are many case studies where the subject is like this, that you are asked by the powerful MLA or the minister to, aap thoda dekh lijiye. This is how the people talk. So, therefore, what it means actually is that he is asking you to use your powers to his advantage and asking you to ignore the provisions of law. In other words, you temporarily become his, what you call chamcha in Hindi, instead of exercising your power as a lawfully empowered body to discharge lawful public duties. That's exactly is the message. So like this, there are 5 other cases I've mentioned. All these are pretty controversial. And these are burning issues in some ways, like the issue of Rohingyas, for example. But as a civil servant, when you deal with any case studies, there are 2 things you must bear in mind. One, appreciation of facts is very important. What are the facts? Appreciation of facts. Second is appreciation of policy and appreciation of law. In case law is involved. I give another example. Or happens that you see, the system that we have in this country is what was laid down by 4 Europeans in Calcutta. 4 of them. Generally not remembered with fondness. Lord Macaulay, who drafted the first Common Criminal Code of India, Code of Criminal Procedure. He drafted the Indian Evidence Act. The second person was Lord Cornwallis, who created the system of judiciary on modern lines, separating executive from the judiciary. Okay. Third person is Lord William Bentinck, who created the Provincial Civil Service, the what you call PCS. Third. And the fourth person again, I would say it is Lord Dalhousie. See? So, in other words, the entire system of justice, delivery of justice, criminal and civil, see? And the entire system of governance are by and large based on the statutes made in 1919, Government of India Act, 1935, the Government of India Act, and finally, the India Independence Act of 1947 and the Constitution of India. Okay? Under Article 362 of the Indian Constitution, all laws which are passed earlier have been taken over and allowed to continue. And law, including the procedures. Now, here this is very important. The law that we implement, the policies that we implement are within the framework of what is called common law. You know what is common law? Common law means, in simple language, the British laws, rules, procedures, and the principles of justice, which we in India have adopted. We are not the only country, many other countries have adopted it. What it means is that most of our laws are not made by the legislature. They are judge-made laws. This is very important. Take, for instance, the appointment of judges under the collegium system. There is no provision in the Constitution. It is based on some judgments of the Supreme Court. Therefore, what is necessary is that one must go through the orders of the courts issued from time to time to create your sense of values. I mean administrative values. And the primary aspect of the common law is respect for procedures. Respect for procedure. The word procedure is fundamental, is a very basic thing. And I give an example how every dilemma that you face, which you might see in case studies, basically relates to procedure. I give a hypothetical example. Under the Arms Act, district magistrate in districts and police commissioner in areas which are under police commissioner system enjoys the power to issue arms license to individuals. Now, these arms don't include AK-47. Basically, it means .22 or .32, etc. There's a category of prohibited bores and non-prohibited bore. Now, you can apply for it. Any citizen is free to apply. Now, the Arms Act has rules under the Arms Act. It lays down the procedure and indirectly the qualifications required to hold a personal weapon. So the applicant has to give in writing why he requires a gun. In the state where I had worked, in Northeast, the usual reason for application was to protect my life from the wild animals, or mainly wild animals. Unfortunately, after Wildlife Preservation Act, these cannot be a valid ground for grant of any license. After Forest Conservation Act and Wildlife Preservation Act, etc., you cannot cite this as a reason. So what people would do normally is to say, sir, I am a well-off person. I am well-off. I fear, apprehend thefts, robbery, etc., etc. Therefore, I badly need a gun to protect myself. Now, the application has to be processed according to a procedure. The procedure is an inquiry and verification of the facts. If he is wealthy, what is his income? Second, whether he has got a house strong enough to keep the revolver or whatever in safe custody. If he has a kacha house, he is unfit to hold a personal weapon. This is the common sense. Third point is that what is his reputation in the locality? Is he a bully? Is he a man of quarrelsome nature? Or a habitual offender of traffic rules on his motorbike or whatever? Fourth is that whether he has any political affiliation which groups habitually creating problems in the area. Now, suppose you get a report which is not quite clear. You have to take a decision. And in that scenario, there's a telephone call from a local MLA or a minister. ये हमारा भतीजा है, आप थोड़ा देख लीजिए, अब भी अच्छा है, he's a good man, you know. रिपोर्ट में तो हेरा फेरी कभी भी होता है, लेकिन वो he is a good man, you know. So आप जरा कर दीजिए. What will you do? Here, one has to strictly go by the procedure. You cannot ignore, by the criteria of justice, the facts on record. Because when you deal with any case study, there are two terms which are bureaucratic. One is facts in issue. See? Facts, what are the facts in issue? Number two is that, what is the cause of action? Cause of action means whether to grant license or not. That's the cause of action. Facts in issue is the report. Now, respect for procedure demands strict adherence to the report, and if you feel that the report is vague, you are free to ask for clarifications. You can ask the local police or the Tahsildar to submit another report because these points are not very clear. Okay? There's one point which is normally taken into account is whether the person who is applying for the license is likely to misuse it by threatening people, etc. It will enhance his position. The acquisition of a gun gives him a certain amount of prestige. Okay? It enhances his power and position in the society. So therefore, the implications of that must be borne in mind. In other words, a simple matter has complex possibilities. So, the whole idea of studying practical ethics is basically to enable you to take your own decision without fear or favor, and in a just, fair and transparent manner. Okay? So I have to say, whatever I have to say, I've done. Only one point, that the concern for marginalized, the poor, which means that you may go extra mile, ignore the procedures sometimes for the sake of justice, but it is a rare case. Take for instance these below poverty line list. If suppose you come across a person whose name is not there, but he has come to seek certain, help from the government, it would not be proper to give him the relief straight away, because that will be violative of the procedure, that this should go only to those whose names figure in the BPL. But ethics will demand, practical ethics will demand, that you help the person to get his name included in the BPL list. You are respecting the procedure, as well as you have an ethical mind, a compassionate mind, a mind willing to help the poor by enabling the person to become eligible. Okay. Now this is what is called going an extra mile. You go an extra mile to help the poor and the marginalized. And that is a part of the ethics. Your ethical framework of mind must have this particular element. That is willingness to go an extra mile to help the poor. So these are the mental equipments of a civil servant who has to deal with such cases on regular basis in his life. Right? So, okay, then I would appreciate if somebody could read this brief paragraph and then raise the issues to the class. That will be easier.
Okay, does anyone want to read first case study?
You are a practicing lawyer in Supreme Court and incidentally made a part of UN Observer team on human rights in the neighboring country, where government is allegedly conducting crackdown on its ethnic group. Based on reports of serious human rights violation, your team has conducted investigation of the issue and found that reports are true. Your team submit the report to UN and you come back to your country and resume legal practice. After few months, you get the official intimation from the government that along with few well-known Supreme Court lawyers, you have been given the responsibility of fighting the case of refugees on the behalf of government. The government stand on this issue is that it cannot allow illegal immigrants inside, as they pose serious threat to national security. This case presents you a big opportunity to work with top lawyers of the country and build reputation in legal fraternity. You are aware of strategic and social implications of allowing refugees to enter in border districts. At the same time, your experience tells you that they are vulnerable and need support to save their lives. First question is, what are the ethical dilemma you face in this case?
Second, buddy.
The second is, if you decide to take the case, what would be your line in argumentation? Third is,
Third one.
discuss the ethics behind the policy of refugee adoption as conceived by UN Convention on Refugees and Constitution values enshrined in a chapter of fundamental rights.
Well, what's your thinking on that? This is not a case relating to a civil servant. You are a lawyer. It's a general ethics kind of a matter. Okay? You're clear, ready? Okay. Now let's discuss what are the issues here. You see, remember, the whole idea is to help you to develop an administrative mind. Administrative mind is not a simple mind. Sada sida nahi hai. It's a bit calculated mind. You have to be calculated. You have to have a calculated mind. That is, pros and cons of the situation. What is your response to it? It is cleverly drafted. I must compliment you on having done a good job. Now, what exactly is the catch in this whole matter? Can anybody point out? Tell me, what is the catch here?
I want to give some ethical dilemma, sir.
बताइए.
Ethical dilemma, sir. Means dilemma between safeguarding the human rights of the refugees, and that is the principle of justice, sir. and via the personal interest of building reputation, my own reputation.
Okay. Yes. Yes, tell me.
What should the ethical dilemma is based on this component? First, humanity perspective in this condition. Humanity perspective. Second one is the professional justice order relevant. And third one is the judicial commitment to prove these values in organization.
Okay. Yes.
So one dilemma is between human rights of refugees and the national security, and the other is promoting one's personal gains by working with the
Yeah.
top lawyers, and against showing his personal feelings for the refugees.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I think it is knowing the truth and suppressing the truth. He already knew that they have troubled people.
Yes.
As mentioned in the last two sentences, he is aware of the situations and the experience through which he is knowing that they are vulnerable and they need support to save their lives.
Okay. Yes.
So the dilemma is national security and in human rights. And the second one is his professional interest and duties towards his nation. And, it's written there that government has told the court that it's a serious threat to national security.
Okay.
So it's his duty to support government and national security.
Okay. Fine.
Sir, as already they have said, one that is what I have found, it is about the reputation of the lawyer concerned and the reputation of country at international level. Because each contradictory, he will contradict if he will think about his conscience. Because the government's stand is they are the illegal migrants and all those things. So if he is saying, government should take and all those things, he can do other things like he can talk about the refugees in that the country should work out, the concerned country should be like the Bangladesh said and all those things. So, but if he's taking his side as an ethical person, then he will contradict the government's position. That is what.
Okay. See, in all these cases, we have to go through each sentence pretty carefully and the import of each sentence. Okay. And just ask yourself a question. Was there any dearth of lawyers in this country willing to defend the smugglers and known criminals for a hefty fee? Was there any dearth of lawyers in this country ever willing to defend a person accused of heinous crimes? No, there is no dearth. The code of conduct for a lawyer is laid down in the Advocates Act. Very clear. Do's and don'ts, etc. A lawyer wears different hats on different occasions. That is his profession. Okay. Now, as you have correctly mentioned, there are three issues. Now, if you see this sentence carefully, in his personal capacity, X was appointed a member of a United Nations committee to look into the human rights situation in a neighboring country. In his own personal capacity. The subject is human rights violations. Okay. Now, here, the government is asking him to appear for the government to deal with the case of illegal immigration, illegal migrants. Now, the laws of migration are different, completely different. So, if somebody, because of his legal reputation in the profession, was on a UN panel, it does not prevent him from, under the provisions of the Advocate Act, to appear for the government in a case where the government's sole stand is that these refugees are illegal migrants. So, there is apparently no ethical issue. The two issues are different. Okay? Now the word refugee. India is not a signatory to 1951 UN Convention on Refugees. Now, as a lawyer, if you are offered a brief by the government on a matter of such great importance, you are expected to accept it. The legal professional ethics demands acceptance. Okay? So, if you take up the case, you have to stand for your client. You have to build up a case that these are illegal migrants. They violated the Indian Passport Act. They have entered into this country without valid travel documents. And for all you know, they might have been facing charges in their own countries, which may be right or wrong or whatever. You have no means to know. Therefore, on this very ground, I don't see any ethical dilemma. Rather, it's a great honor for the person concerned to have been called upon by the government to defend its case. Third issue is discuss the ethics behind the policy of refugee adoption. It's a different matter altogether, not connected with this particular case. And here, as you'll see the paper that I have circulated on the Rohingya issue, the Article 21 of the Constitution, as clarified by orders of the Honorable Supreme Court and the High Courts, is large. It encompasses the foreigners also, the right to life, like that. And though India is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention of 1951, we are a party to the customary international law, which leaves it to the discretion of the countries concerned to allow refugees on merits of each case. We have allowed refugees from Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Tibet in 1959, when Dalai Lama himself came, from Bangladesh, and therefore we have precedents. In fact, we have allowed people seeking refuge in this country on grounds of political oppression in their own countries to, I think, a much longer list of affected people. We do not know, but you can find out from the net. So many others, earlier we have given shelters. From Kenya, East Africa, some years ago when Indians were thrown out by Idi Amin, a good number of them came to India also, like that. So, here you simply have to state the ethical issue and the responsibility of the global community and the stand of the United Nations on this issue, and leave it at that. Now, in this connection, if you just see the points I raised in the notes on Rohingya problem particularly, that gives it a clear picture. In 1998, the Supreme Court ordered in the case of Arunachal Pradesh versus National Human Rights Commission that the right to life under Article 29 is not restricted to Indian citizens, but extends to the asylum seekers, and that no person including a foreigner, could be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to a reasonable procedure established by law. The important thing here, there has to be a reasonable procedure. That procedure has to be followed even if the request for asylum is rejected. Okay, so therefore procedural law is like you can say a basic law of the country. In fact, in the basic structure doctrine laid down by Supreme Court, this aspect has been highlighted. Justice is delivered only when the procedure is duly followed. That is very important. Right? So we come to the next question.
Second question.
Second point is not clear. Like, what would be your line of policy when you study?
Last one. Discuss the ethics. Is it? Simon.
Second part B. That if you decide to take the case, what would be your line of policy?
You see, if you take the case, then you have no option but to plead successfully the case of your client. If you are not willing to pay, if you feel that morally you are not comfortable, then please don't take the brief. It's very clear. A half-hearted lawyer is worse than a doctor who doesn't know his job. No, the government should be obliged to find out some other person. Okay. And it will be insincere on your part to accept the brief, not being convinced about the case. Okay. Yeah.
Second question. You are the sarpanch of a panchayat. There is a primary school run by the government in your area. Midday meals are provided to children attending the school. The headmaster has now appointed a new cook in the school to prepare the meals. However, when it is found that cook is from the Dalit community, almost half of the children belonging to higher caste are not allowed to take meals by their parents. Consequently, the attendance in the schools falls sharply. This could result in the possibility of discontinuation of the midday meal scheme, thereafter of teaching staff, and subsequently closing down of school. Now, two questions are: first, discuss some feasible strategies to overcome the conflict and to create right ambience, and second one is, what should be the responsibilities of different social segments and agencies to create positive social ambience for accepting such changes?
Yeah. Please go through it and just identify the core issues. Okay, first you underline, this is how you should scan. First you underline the word Sarpanch. Second, primary school. Third is midday meals. Fourth, headmaster. Fifth, new cook. And sixth, parents. And seventh is attendants. These are the key words. Okay? Now, when you look at this question, first think of the role of Sarpanch, an elected public official. And panchayats are now, after 73rd Amendment, they are constitutional bodies. So he is also a public servant within the meaning of the Supreme Court judgment in Karunanidhi's case. He is a public servant. The famous judgment of the Supreme Court in Karunanidhi's case many years ago, where it was defined. So the Sarpanch is a public servant. And then you have to appreciate the legal position. As I said, appreciation of law and policy. Appreciation of facts you have done already. Now what should be the strategy within the framework of the policy? And please remember, policy has the sanction of law. Every policy, when it is laid on the table of the House, acquires the character of law. Okay. So the policy on eradication of untouchability, embodied in the statutes, have the force of law. And what is the role of a public servant in that situation? Because strategies have to be within the framework of the policy. It cannot be outside that. Okay? I think one of you said that a civil servant is an agent of change. I would like him to respond to this question. You said agents of change. So, okay, what do you think you should do as the agent of change in this kind of environment?
Sir, according to me, it's a clear case of usual task mentality. And as a suffrage, since I'm obliged constitutionally to work out the things in the favor of the different class of people, so first of all, I will try to make a meeting of the parents of the high caste people, and I will tell them that this is not the case, and I may make some sort of initiative, like I will invite them to have the meal, and as a sarpanch I will also take part in that meal. So first, if the parents are taking the meal with the sarpanch themselves, I think then onward they won't disallow their kids to not have the lunch or something. So first thing I will do that, I can do under the procedure itself. And the second thing, I will make sure that this kind of case is not happening in other school also under my institute. So I will also make an investigation to such thing that there is not such a thing. And what should be the responsibility of different social segments and agencies to create positive and social evidence. So here I will think about the attitudinal change, how to make the attitudinal change in the people. So it may be like if the high caste people are not sending their kids because of the Dalit, it means they are having the caste mentality in their mind in a very rigid way. So as a Sarpanch, I will also think about that how they are having this kind of thoughts. So I will make certain initiatives in that direction also. I'm just thinking that.
Okay. Any other thought? Yeah.
So also the parents can be made aware of the laws against untouchability and how they can be punished regarding that.
Very good.
And because social changes we cannot expect it to happen in a day, therefore they have to be made aware of laws.
You see, Sarpanch is a democratically elected head of the Panchayat. What is his responsibility in this regard?
First is to persuade them that they are ruining the education of their kids, which is not right. Then casteism is a problem, they should not do this, it is a punishable.
Yes, very much. And what about B? Different social segments and agencies?
Like media, we can involve media, newspaper about this problem, like advertisements, that place creating awareness, or like if it is a very small place, so by the help of local natas, like
So I think the students are also very important stakeholders in the whole case. So they too should be taken in picture. They should be persuaded that they must study. They should come to the class. They should continue with their regular routine. Then parents should be persuaded for the same. Media and others can play the role, but who are the direct beneficiary? If they will take this as a stand, that will help more than anything else.
Yes. Any other thought?
Teachers should educate the students about the social harmony, like against social discrimination, because they are the future citizens of that area. So teachers also play key role.
Okay. Any other? Yes.
Parents should be taking confidence about the quality of the food and the cleanliness and the dresses.
Yes, yes. Good.
Sir, as a Sarpanch, it's my duty to establish harmonious relations in society. In this particular case, since the caste mentality is there is a divide in society between upper caste and lower caste. So this can also become an issue of between two communities. So if to sort it out at this primary stage, I think as a Sarpanch, I'll call a meeting of Panchayat, and I'll discuss this issue at the level of Panchayat. So in Panchayat there are, people from all segments will be there, and I'll also invite these school staff, because they are in because headmaster has appointed this Dalit book, so they don't have such caste mentality. And I'll also invite higher education authorities like BDO and all, so that these people are pursued in a better manner, because all these authorities are, they are showing that their commitment to the constitutional value of equality and equality of opportunity. So I think discussing the issue at a larger platform will help in changing the attitudes of these.
Okay. So there are several important thoughts emerged. One is that, as you have said, this is a case of practice of untouchability in a different form, in an indirect manner. This is a case of continuing practice of untouchability, which is punishable under the Prevention of Atrocities, etc. Act. And this has to be, according to you, upgraded to a panchayat level issue, not simply a matter between the school, headmaster and the parents. It's a larger social issue. So the Sarpanch, being the elected head of the panchayat, has to take leadership role, has to assume a leadership role in this matter. Therefore, he has to mobilize the society and to stop it altogether. And a kind of a clear message should go that since it is a offense already, Therefore, the only way to improve, rectify this matter is to stop practicing it by convincing others that they should send their children to the school. Now, this requires the role of an active agent of change, social change. And whatever informal organizations that we have, like Mahila Mandals, women-led self-help groups, and others active in the area, could be mobilized through the agency of the panchayats to achieve this object of restoration of harmony. And its importance is enormous. The school might be closed, but more importantly, more damagingly, it might vitiate the entire environment, the ambience of the village. Okay? Right, we move on to the third question.
Any question on this? Any further questions on question 2?
Question third.
Hmm.
You are a parent of a 6-year-old child who studies in one of the best private schools in the city. The school figures among the top in giving results. One morning, you hear the unfortunate news in which a student from your child's class found in an unconscious state. Later, you get to know that the child is the victim of violent attack from an adult and went into coma, unable to resume his study. The news makes you concerned about your child engagement in the school. Next day, as a concerned parent, you approach the school management to understand the situation, but you found no clear answer to what happened with the child, except that the district administration is pondering to refer the case to higher investigative agency. Having found no answers, the group of parents have decided to withdraw their children from school. They are demanding that the hefty school fee should be refunded so that they can admit their child to other school. Part A, what are the ethical concerns involved in the case? And Part B, as a parent, what ethical dilemmas would you face with respect to parenting? Part C, is private sector involvement in schools socially useful given the fact that these schools charge hefty school fees and fails to ensure well-being of children?
I'm sure all you have at the back of your mind the Ryan school matter, So keep that in view, and the orders passed by the court in this regard, which I have circulated, and just give a thought and see what can be done in this particular case. Only difficulty is that none of you might be a parent at this stage, therefore it will be difficult for you to appreciate this matter. But nevertheless, make an attempt. Put yourself in the position of a citizen.
Very straightforward question.
Straightforward, and you have to apply your administrative mind. It has been drafted in a manner calculated to confuse you. Just carefully see the formulation. What are the facts in issue? This is number one. You have to make up your mind. What are the facts and issue in this case? And
Quality education versus security of their children. As a parent.
the first is commission of a crime. A crime has been committed, isn't it? That is the most important thing, a violent attack, a crime. And a crime must lead to punishment. Have any of you read this famous novel of Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment? So if there is a crime, there has to be punishment. Right? First is there is a crime. Next, second question is, where was the crime committed? Place. Who is the victim? And what are the implications of this particular crime? Exactly for education, quality education, and other matters that you mentioned. So these are the facts in issue. Concern for safety is also an ethical concern. Concern for child safety is a perfectly legitimate ethical concern of every parent, every individual for that matter. Yes.
Sir, more is lack of transparency in school management, and the resultant is trust deficit between parents and school.
Poor governance, that's also an important issue here. So what are your concerns? What are the ethical concerns according to you?
The safety and security of child, both physical and mental security.
Yes.
And the constant environment in a school for the study. Third is failure of the school or the school management in ensuring security despite of taking high fees.
What is the role of district administration in that? That's also important. It is mentioned here.
Regular inspections.
A district education officer is also responsible.
Laid out safety norms are not followed.
Yes. Okay, come on.
So another ethical concern is academic
Which comes first, safety and security, or academic excellence? Okay. And what about involvement of parents in management of schools, which is an important feature of school governance in Europe and in Western countries. The parents are deeply involved in how the school is managed in advanced countries. That's also an important point. It shows lack of parents' involvement in these matters. So how will you articulate your response? And the role of the district administration is important. The system of district administration in India was introduced by Warren Hastings in 1773. He wanted the district magistrate should be the eyes, the ears, and the voice of the government in the district. There is nothing in the district that is not within the range of responsibilities of the district magistrate and collector. Therefore, this also indicates the failure of district administration. It has an important role in ensuring safety and security of obviously children who go there. So, how will you put it across the first two, and then we come to the third issue, which might be a subject for your essay paper, the role of private sector in education. What is the Indian experience? So, what is the response to A? One important fact you should mention is this unresponsive attitude of the school administration, because this point is vital. You found no clear answer, which means lack of proper response, which makes you apprehensive. But probably the same thing might happen to my own children. Like that. A bit dicey question, no doubt, but why not make up your mind on this in a straightforward manner? Here, you see, being aggrieved by the response, some parents decide to withdraw their children. Fine. But is that the answer to the problem? No. They might as well put them in a school worse than the one that they were studying before. So tell us, what exactly is the consensus?
There should be clear guidelines regarding security, sir, as it is now being issued by central government. And regarding the, although we know that private schools are very much required, as in public sector we lack institutions, infrastructure and quality, but fees should be reasonable. I feel there must be some mechanism involving both the government and private management to decide what is the reasonable as per place, as per current high standard or something, if it is city, if it is village.
What is your conclusion?
So I should wait for the result of investigating agency, and then I should decide accordingly. What's the reason? Is the environment of school is not good? Is it inciting students to commit violence? Something like that.
Okay, let us move logically. First, there is a deep apprehension, serious apprehension about safety of school children in private schools. First proposition. Second proposition is, this is a matter of serious public concern. It is also a matter of serious concern for the local administration. And the local administration has already taken steps to refer this case to criminal justice authorities. It's a crime. A crime has been committed. So it should logically lead to investigation and conviction in an expeditious manner, so that the public confidence is restored. So there is a need to urgently restore the confidence of the parents and the public in this particular matter. Okay? Third is that withdrawal of the children from the school is within the discretion of the parents. Okay? Whereas refund of the school fees paid is a matter for the management to decide. After all, they have received fees, they have provided some education. So there is a legal issue involved here. The refund may not be automatic. You have to fight. So this is a separate issue altogether. Next is your ethical dilemma. It may be that how is it that society leaves safety of the children to the management of the school only? It is your concern also. So there should be greater involvement of parents in management of schools. And also the involvement of the administration responsible for security. Okay, security of the people, personal security of the children. We have the Minister of Women and Child Development. In every district there are officials whose jobs, whose duties are precisely to promote welfare of women and children. They should be more actively involved in this particular sphere, rather than implementing a few government schemes like that, We have the ICDS program, etc. A more proactive role on the part of the citizens as well as the administration is required. It is not that only government should do. It has to be a community effort. Okay? And this dilemma has another dimension, that is, you are paying hefty fees. But if the child is not secure, education is secondary. Therefore, the way to resolve this dilemma is assumption of greater responsibility by the society in the matter of management of schools. Society has to be more active. You can't transfer the responsibility to the government or others. So this requires what you call an improved democratic governance of the institutions vital for upliftment of the society, like education. And the same approach should apply to health and other facilities of the state, and also by the private sector, right? Third question is a general issue, whether private sector involvement is good or bad. It varies from place to place, depends on the character of the management, the quality of teaching staff and the leadership. In some cases they are doing very well. But if in some cases you find that the profit is the main motive, in that case obviously other things are not being properly handled. or managed. So in this manner, you have to formulate your reply. I would suggest you write and mail it to him, so that I have a chance to later on look at it. Then we'll give our response. Okay? And this will apply to your first question also. All three, that we have discussed. The most practical way to go about is to write briefly within, say, 150 words or so, and then you read carefully to see whether the facts in issue and the policies in question match, and there is a coherent kind of a conclusion. It's not that leave it to the government or leave it to the parents. No, synergy is what is required. Synergy of action by the government, by the public, and also by the school authorities. The synergy is what you might like to suggest. Okay? Right. Now, the next question, before that, I would suggest somebody to go through this last para of this paper that I circulated on this Aravali case. You can just read it. You all are. Yeah. And in these 6 cases that is circulated, I would appreciate if you could just follow these developments, because these are happening every day. Orders are being issued by the courts or the National Green Tribunal. Okay. Please.
So this is Aravali case. Aravali case before the NGT, National Green Tribunal, is yet another interesting case for study. Though it is still under adjudication, the matter relates to permission granted by the government of Haryana to allow transfer of large plot of land to a realtor, which are notified under the Punjab Land Preservation Act as a kind of green cover, through it was not notified as forest under the Indian Forest Act. Forest is a concurrent subject in the constitution. The state government overruled the objection raised by the statutory authority in its forest department. For example, the DFO and Principal Chief for Conservation of Forest, who pointed out that as per the benefit of doubt should go in favor of the land being forest. And in such cases, its transfer to non-forest use requires approval of the center and is not within the powers of the state government. Hence, the legality of this matter is under scrutiny of the NGT. The main issue here is inviolability of the power exercised by the civil servant. The forest department officials, in this case, have their own rights, and they are being accountable only to the courts and the central government for implementation of laws pertaining to a subject under the concurrent list, and not to the state government in the true spirit of all India services.
Okay. You see, this is a case which is worth following. You might like to follow up subsequent developments in this particular case. As I mentioned in the beginning, a civil servant is primarily responsible for enforcement of laws. It's a law enforcement agency. Okay? This is not often underscored in the standard Karolbag notebooks on public administration. See, it's because the word service in English language has a different meaning. But in India, we interpret it in a different way. Take, for instance, the Hindi translation of bureaucracy is Naukar-Shahi, isn't it? It is absolutely wrong, I might say, because Charles de Gaulle once said, France is not a republic, France is not a democracy, France is a bureaucracy. You see, he said so out of a sense of frustration, because he experienced that whatever he wants to do, his secretary tells him, sir, you cannot do it. One day they will ask his secretary, tell me what I can do. He said, if that is your position, let me tell you, you can do a hell of a lot. Therefore, the system that you have is founded on law and on the time-honored principle of separation of executive, judiciary, and the legislature. See, the separation of powers, it's not very easy to understand or appreciate. It took Europe centuries to understand the philosophy of separation of powers. It will take us one more century to understand. You see, it is something that has been given to us, we have accepted. But there is a philosophy, there is a psychology. It is based on assessment of psychology of human beings and institutions. You see, what is the foundation? Let me just quote one thing. It is based on a principle that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Who said this? Lord Acton. It means that power of not only an individual, but even an institution can be corrupted if it is given a lot of powers. Therefore, institutions are as dangerous or as prone to misuse of power as individuals. This is the point. Therefore, no institution should be allowed to enjoy, quote and unquote, overriding powers. Whether it is legislature, whether it is executive, or whether it is judiciary. A balance. How you maintain the balance depends on the genius of the people, the political culture of the society. In Pakistan, for instance, there is no rule of law, though they had the same system we have in 1948. Pakistan may have elections periodically, but no Prime Minister of Pakistan has completed his full term. Either he was assassinated or, put in the waste paper basket or whatever. So, just see how the concept of separation of power works. In Pakistan, there are 3 courts. One is the Sharia court, other is the secular court, and third is the military court. Now, it is a madman's game. Okay? Now, rule of law and the blasphemy laws do not go together. Rule of law is founded on the British principle, sanctified by the French Revolution, that every citizen is equal before law, and nobody is below the law also. The idea of citizenship is founded not on your birth, frankly. It is founded on the Western idea that every taxpayer is equal, and taxpayers have a right to decide through their representatives organized in parliament how the tax proceeds are to be used by the state. Okay, this is what had happened over the last 800 years from the Magna Carta right up to 1950, our constitution. This is the process. It takes time. Therefore, there is a very basic doctrine of conflict of interest. The Delhi government is presently facing a case. The conflict of interest is the foundation of parliamentary democracy everywhere in the world. It means that if I am a legislature, I must be freed from any executive responsibility, other than as a member of the cabinet. Okay. Therefore, the issue of appointment of parliamentary secretaries by the Delhi administration has been hit by the orders of the court. So, once we have a system which operates on the basis of separation of powers, it means that the job of the legislature ends after laying down the policy and after making the laws. Laws must include a list of officials empowered to implement the laws. This is how the civil servants appear to exercise the powers. And while exercising these powers, they are answerable to the courts and to their designated superiors. Right? Now, this fine-tuning of the system is what democracy is all about. Now, in this particular case, Aravali case, I've given you a long introduction. The short point is this. During the colonial period, pre-1947 period, John Lawrence and others who came to rule Punjab, they found that this was an arid land where there is need for some kind of a forest cover. So the British period, this Punjab Land Preservation Act, an unique piece of legislation in this country. No other state has this kind of a law. Punjab Land Preservation Act. The idea is to notify certain areas for development of a green cover. Okay, essential to maintain the ecological balance. The land has been defined so as to include water bodies also. It's not only solid land, water bodies. If there is a lake, it should be notified under Land Preservation Act as a kind of inviolable piece of land. Okay. So, in this particular case, when the subject is in the concurrent list, a civil servant in the forest department is answerable to the state government as well as to the central government. This is very important. On this point, the IFS officers, Forest Service officers, hold a special position. The IS officers do not implement a subject directly which is in the concurrent list. In a way, education is a subject in the concurrent list. Yes, but the role is not so direct in the sense that Government of India, as a matter of policy under the National Forest Policy, etc., had assumed a role, and Supreme Court and the National Green Tribunal had a role, have a role under the National Green Tribunal Act. So the forest officer concerned has pointed out, while discharging his duty very clearly, that this particular land has been notified under Punjab Land Preservation Act. And there is a judgment of the Supreme Court defining forest. And the Honorable Supreme Court defined forest as one, as per the dictionary meaning of the term forest. Okay. There's another court order that if there is a doubt whether a particular area is forest or not, the benefit of doubt should go in favor of the land being treated as a forest. Now, these orders have the force of law, and therefore a forest officer is duty bound to obey that law, to go by the law. He has no choice. This is a case where आप थोड़ा देख लीजिए, कुछ रास्ता निकलाइए, ये नहीं हो सकता, इसमें रास्ता निकलना मुश्किल है, रोड ब्लॉक है, अब कैसे जाएंगे? You know, this is the kind of response that one should logically have. And therefore, the DFO, which is a lady officer from Kerala, she had sent a strong note saying that I am unable to implement this order, and because it is inviolable. This. So she sent this matter to her superior. Now, when the chief conservator of forest also says that I have no authority, because under the forest policy of Government of India, which has the force of law, conversion of forest land to non-forest use requires the approval of the Ministry of Forests. And Ministry of Forests has to go by the Forest Advisory Committee's recommendation. The ministry doesn't have this power, mind you. This is what is called the concept of power in a democracy, and the concept of checks and balances. Okay, suppose there was no Forest Advisory Committee. There was no provision for a Forest Advisory Committee in the Forest Act. Then this paper would have gone to Ministry of Forestry, and the concerned person could have been contacted, "Aap thoda dekh lijiye." So the order might have been passed and would have been considered okay. But as a measure of abundant caution and to protect the public interest and to promote afforestation, to protect the forest cover, the Forest Conservation Act has this provision. That is, making the executive, liable to seek a report from an expert body called the Forest Advisory Committee, which is chaired by the Director General of Forest. Even then, when the Director General of Forest wears one hat as the Special Secretary, but we wears another hat as the chairman of this committee of experts, where he has to take a proper, professional, scientific look at the proposal. So, as Director General of Forest, he is definitely under the Secretary. But as the chairman of the Forest Advisory Committee, law demands and public interest demands that he looks at it without being influenced by any other person or any other authority, the merits of the case. And therefore, in this particular case, the PCCA wrote back that it is not possible. It requires approval of central government. Now, when he was overruled, the matter now goes to the court. It will be interesting for you to see the outcome of this particular case. The point I'm trying to make is that please remember, when you deal with every such tricky question, that in the final analysis, a civil servant exercising his power is answerable only to the courts and to the law. Why? There is an element of public trust. The doctrine of public trust is not highlighted generally. See, the whole idea of merit-based, examination-based recruitment is that there is a public trust in the persons selected through an examination for holding positions of responsibility and authority. And positions of authority require exercise of powers using your own discretion and your sense of what is called right or wrong, appropriate or inappropriate. Now, this is the most important aspect of this judgment, that ultimately a civil servant has to go by the law and the rule book. This is what is called the philosophy of independent, apolitical civil service, which is one of the foundations of parliamentary democracy. Separation of powers, independent judiciary, and an apolitical civil service, and in the South Asian context, isolation of the military from the civil and political life, and civil supremacy. Lack of it has put Madame Aung San Suu Kyi in a terrible situation. In Burma, under their 2008 constitution, 25% of the members of the parliament, can you imagine, is nominated by the army? And 3 ministries are under control of the armed forces, even now. Ministry of Home, Ministry of Defense, and Ministry of External Affairs. What is then left? And they have a right to interfere in the civil administration whenever they like. And the result is what you all know. So the role of an independent civil service is vital for functioning of a parliamentary democracy. And it is the bounden duty of every civil servant to uphold these principles of law and systems of government. Okay, I've taken a lot of time. Let's go over to the question. Please read, sorry. Fourth question, Forest Officer.
Fourth question, you are a forest officer posted in district neighboring commercial capital of the state. Your district have been witnessing fast growth of real estate as capital city is expanding. Recently, an order from the state government has allowed the transfer of large part of land to realtor. The decision was made to catalyze private investment in the state and increase revenue. The land, however, is found to be notified as eco-sensitive and green cover under Land Preservation Act of the state. However, the state government considers the land as not as a forested land. Further, the environmental groups are demanding withdrawal of the government's order and stopping construction activities in the eco-sensitive zone by builders. Various civil society groups have approached you to take actions against firms who are illegally falling the trees and constructing roads. So there are three questions. First question is, what are the ethical issues involved in the case? Second question is, what are the options do you have? State the merit and demerit of each. Then third question, what would be your choice of action and why?
It's pretty straightforward. So you see, one small point here. Environmental ethics is also important.
Can you answer the first question?
Yeah.
Ethical issues involved. Just list out.
Environmental development,
Yes.
sustainable development.
And ethical issues means ecological security. Ecological and environmental security are important for well-being of the people and sustainable development. Whether you can compromise, that's the issue. And that's the ethical issue. Options are pretty straightforward. They allow the real estate development, and the consequences are declining, ecology, and the consequent harmful effects on the health and the environment, pollution of this, that, or the other. And the demerits. Course of action, you must bring it to the notice of the government, the facts of the case, and to take an appropriate decision. You cannot overrule the decision of the state government. It seems from this formulation that the government has already decided. So what we could do is to bring out the fallacies, the weaknesses, and that it is a case fit for a review, reconsideration of the matter. That is all you can do. And also forward the representations made by the environment groups, the arguments they have given, recommending that their case, their arguments should be looked into and appropriate decisions taken. In this question also, please write your answer and forward to him. Should we go to the next question? Okay, please. Yeah, please tell me.
Can I advise these civil society members and NGOs to directly give this petition to state government, not me?
You see, the main pleasure of holding a office is that people come with petitions to you. I enjoyed it immensely, if not for the language. For instance, when I was sub-division officer in Mysore Hills, I used to get representations in beautiful English. First is to His Excellency. So I had to point out that I am not in that exalted category. But people will say, sir, for you, for us, you are the excellency. Okay. Then they will write, it begins with great respect and humility. See? I would like to make the following submission for your very kind considerations. After that, the whole thing, then last sentence is, for this act of favor, your humble petitioner shall always pray for your health and prosperity. And the last sentence, I have the honor to state that I remain your most obedient servant. Like this. So, whenever you get any such representation, rather you should encourage people to come to you to submit representations. Then it is a cause of action for you. When the piece of paper is placed, you must read and go by the merits of the case. Now, if the NGOs have been able to prepare a case, build a case against this particular real estate development, and if they have given cogent reasons, but you might as well tell them, advise them, that they might as well do some more studies, produce some more facts which will compel them to come to you once again. You see, Mrs. Gandhi had a cardinal principle in dealing with problems of Northeast. She said that all demands should never be accepted. You should accept demands in phases. Because if you accept all their demands, they won't come to you. That is what we understood. The whole idea is that one demand should be decided on merits of the case. Other demands might as well remain pending. The importance of bureaucracy precisely is based on this particular position. Therefore, you should encourage them to meet you so that you have a line of communication. You get to know certain facts which your forest officers might not be able to give you. And then you forward these matters to the superior authority with your considered views on the matter. That's the art of administration. Keep the channel of communication open. It should not be closed. So, it's very clear, so you should please write. Any doubt? Any other doubt on this? No. Next question. Okay, fine. We can take. It's 1:30 now, right? Yes, I have no problem. Okay. Hmm? No, I'm not. But I can continue. Hmm? If you can get me a cup of tea, nothing like it. Oh.
Fifth question, land needed for mining, dams and other large-scale projects is acquired mostly from Adivasis, hill dwellers and rural communities. The displaced persons are paid monetary compensation as per the legal provisions. However, the payment is often tardy.
Payment is often tardy. It's a mistake.
It is often tardy.
Is often tardy.
In any case, it cannot sustain the displaced families for long. These people do not possess marketable skills to engage in some other occupation. They end up as low-paid migrant laborers. Moreover, their traditional way of community living are destroyed. Thus, the benefits of development goes to industries, industrialists, and urban communities, whereas the costs are passed on these poor, helpless people. This unjust distribution of costs and benefits is unethical. Suppose you have been entrusted with task of drafting a better compensation cum rehabilitation policy for such displaced persons. How would you approach the problem, and what would be the main elements of your suggested policy?
Good. It's a pretty straightforward question. What are the facts in issue and the policy in question? Appreciation of facts and appreciation of policy. Remember the issue of looking after the marginalized sections of the society. The priority to be given to deal with their problems. Okay, that is an ethical responsibility also.
Solution was from 2016 Mains. So I reviewed it for first time. First time only. So come on to that.
Okay? So pretty straightforward. What are the major issues? Yeah.
So the first issue is the legal provisions itself. The legal provisions, because they are paid according to the legal provisions. So I feel some amendments in the Forest Act, etc., which provide them, put them in a better situation. That would be the first approach that we can follow. Then second one is that they do not possess marketable skills. So we need to address that, the marketable skills. And then the benefits of development don't go to them. Therefore, they can have some stake in the development, whatever is taking place. Therefore, they can be benefited that.
Okay. Any other thought?
The first problem is they are displaced from their natural land. Their status shifted from traditional dweller to migrant laborer. no satisfactory compensation was provided to them. Moreover, no sustainable livelihood is available for them as they are not trained in any other job. Then migration is used and it's further causing trouble to the urban society where they are migrating to imbalance between the rural and urban system, and the destruction of their culture. They were living peacefully and their culture is destroyed.
Yes, very good. Any other thought?
Take the data of great quality and with a accountable manner and proper and timely compensation should be given as per the law. And the site where they are shifted then should have facilities, for example, employment generation skill extra given by the various skill ministry. And housing, because they have lost their land and this compensation is for short time duration, that means they should be given place in the housing scheme like.
Yes. Any other?
One-time monetary compensation is not sufficient. So these industries like mining, dams, वगैरह require workforce. So we can provide some skills and use them as a workforce and a proper settlement. And for long term, we can use CSR as a source for social benefits of these people.
Yes.
In addition to better monetary compensation, these people should be given voluntary marketable skills training programs, something should be there for then employment opportunity covered by minimum wages act and all that. And CSR of that particular area should be targeted towards them. And well planning of rehabilitation policy, keeping in mind their tradition and proper execution of that.
So these are the people who are you like radicalize them a lot. Like these are the people, if they are not getting support from the government, like then what happens? They becomes an Naxalite. And
Yes,
this is
good.
a very big problem which government needs to address.
Very good. Yeah.
Social impact assessment.
Yes.
So they should be provided with free timely education in local language so that they can preserve their culture.
You see, this subject has been widely debated over the last 20 years. It led to the enactment of the Forest Rights Act. Okay, remember that? You must be aware of the basic issues involved in it. You see, one of my distinguished ex-colleagues, N.C. Saxena, he has written on this subject extensively. He called it project-related displacement of tribals, quote and unquote. Is a major issue facing the country. He had estimated that after independence, over 80% of people who had been displaced because of implementation of projects in their lands happen to be tribals. You might see that report. The issue therefore is acquisition of land for mining this, that or the other purposes, which leads to quote NC again, project-related displacement of tribals, destruction of their livelihoods, ways of life, which is a calamity for a tribal, and the consequence is that they become migrant labor. What are the characteristics of the migrant labor in urban areas? First, short life, addiction to things they didn't know before. In other words, their extinction. This is also well documented. compensation cannot be enough for a person whose livelihoods are destroyed and who is shifted physically from one place to another. How much money can you give him? And money paid in lump sum is prone to be finished in no time, as it happened. It doesn't lead to creation of durable assets, income generating assets. Therefore, there was an idea about 15 years back that if you take away tribal lands for mining, let the tribals be shareholders of the mining company so that they could get some assured income. So there are many ideas on this subject. Take the case of tribal resistance to mining of uranium in Meghalaya. The famous case of Damsiasat area, where the tribal said that uranium extraction would lead to destruction of their livelihoods, their villages and their societies. So the government could not implement the decision, though it was thought that this should be exploited. So there is a trade-off between the interests of the people and the larger interests of the country's economic development. Now, balancing this is the task before the administration. Therefore, what you have been asked here is that how to rectify the unjust distribution of costs and benefits. The main ethical issue is this, that they bear the costs, but they get a one-time kind of a dispensation, compensation. So this unjust distribution of costs and benefits must be addressed. That's the point, that's the issue. Okay? Now, what kind of policy will you then prepare? That's the question. Yes?
The policy is determined in a merit and demerit approach, and it is extensive and application based. First point, the rehabilitation policy. First point is taken is that the policy is determined with merit and demerit and compensate with Forest Act and determined with community based organization, and how to enroll the economic and social perspective in this purpose.
Here you have been asked to draft an alternative compensation and rehabilitation policy. It is a creative kind of a effort. You have to apply your mind and address the issues arising out of project-related displacements of tribals. You are free to suggest whatever you like to, but it should be founded on one premise. Since the damage to tribal way of life is so enormous, so huge, and so irreversible, okay? Therefore, the acquisition of land should be minimum, as you have said, because otherwise it might lead to extremism, spread of extremism. Second is that how to reduce the pangs of surrender of one's ancestral lands. How could you compensate? In what way? One is that making him a shareholder, a stakeholder. Other is to give him training, as you suggested, raise his capability. And then don't push him to a area far off. So these facilities should be close by so that there is minimum disturbance or damage to his lifestyle. He retains his culture, etc. So in that manner, briefly, just formulate the outlines, the main, elements of the policy. Okay. See, this reminds me that I must state one thing. For getting into civil service, basically, the board would look forward to, when you go for interview, 3 qualities. Because it will consist mostly of, hardened civil servants who are conservative by nature. As you grow old, you tend to be conservative. It's a part of human nature. First quality is curiosity, interest in other cultures, other societies, based on a wide range of reading habits. That is essential, that your interest is wide-ranging. You may be equally interested in North Korea as well as the Rohingya problem, or the utterances of President Trump and consequences of that, climate change, cultural change, insurgency, everything under the sun. Evidence of wide reading and interest in other cultures and societies and problems associated with it. Take for instance, this particular matter is connected to the Chipko movement and so many movements, Niyamgiri Hills movement in Odisha, so many things happened connected to the environment. So one is expected to know about it and be aware of the main issues. Second is critical thinking, ability to form an opinion of your own. Third is understanding of the polity, the dynamics of the polity. As we mentioned, discuss the role of various instruments of governance. And the fourth quality, which should have been even the first quality, empathy for the marginalized sections of the people. And in this country, I would go to the extent of saying that since only 8% of the people of India are engaged in the formal sector, the size of the marginalized sections or the vulnerable sections in this country is very large. See, things like job security, income security, health security, education security, say environmental and ecological security, these are important. And one must give evidence of a potential to be a generalist. If you look at yesterday's Indian Express, there's an excellent review of a book written by one of my distinguished colleagues, Maharaj Kumar Ranjit Singh, A Life with Wildlife. Ranjit Singh was a student of history. He was born into a princely family in Madhya Pradesh and had early exposure to, forests, wildlife, shikar, and things like that. It became his lifelong passion. He held important positions in environment governance in India and abroad. And his interest was so deep, his knowledge was so great, that a particular species of deer was named after him. A species of deer is called Ranjit Singha. It's found in Madhya Pradesh. So it will be known throughout history as Ranjit Singha. And his source of inspiration was, do you know who? None other than Alan Octavian Hume, ICS, who is generally remembered as the founder of the Congress. But it is forgotten that he is India's first ornithologist. His book, The Birds of India, which he penned down when he was collector of Etawah, is the first book on birds of India. And like Ranjit, Hume also will be remembered. A particular bird is known as Hume's babbler. It will be known throughout the world, throughout history. So it has been possible for him to develop this deep interest in wildlife because of a serious intellectual curiosity, despite his multifarious duties, which he pursued throughout his life as a passion. I suggest just have a look at the review. The title of this book, A Life with Wildlife, written in elegant English, excellent prose, and gives you an insight into the functioning of the government and the system. So it is that kind of approach which is required. I mentioned this before. And when you deal with a matter connected with environment, tribal development, development of scheduled castes and others, related to environment and nature, and not as a matter in isolation. It's a part of the ecosystem. An ecosystem has to be developed to enable every stakeholder to move up, not to move down. Okay, now we come to the last question, fourth.
So this last question, Saraswati was a successful IT professional in USA. Moved by the patriotic sense of doing something for the country, she returned to India. Therefore, together with some other like-minded friends, she formed an NGO to build a school for a poor rural community. The objective of the school was to provide the best quality modern education at the nominal cost. She soon discovered that she has to seek permission from the number of government agencies. The rules and procedures were quite confusing and cumbersome. What frustrated her most was the delays, careless attitude of officials, and constant demand of bribes. Her experience and the experience of many others like her has deterred people from taking up social service projects. A measure of government control over voluntary social work is necessary, but it should not be exercised in a coercive or corrupt manner. What measures can you suggest to ensure that due control is exercised but well-meaning? Honest NGO efforts are not thwarted.
Okay.
Self-approval of NGOs, so that there is no delay in starting, but have quick checks, regular checks by the government authorities.
You see, there is a national policy for the voluntary sector, which is on the website of the Planning Commission. Niti Aayog. It was prepared in 2007 or so, I recall. The idea is to test your interest in the NGO sector, whether you are familiar with the NGO movement and the NGO sector, voluntary sector, as it is called. So therefore, the first thing that you should do, is to look at that policy statement, where the government has expressed its commitment to support growth of voluntary sector as what is called a third sector of the economy and society, public, private, and the voluntary sector. And it has to be treated as a partner of the government in development. And already India has a large NGO sector. See, organizations like Ramakrishna Mission, they are organized under the Societies Registration Act 1861. So like this, so you have to take a positive view, and here the attitude of the officials is callous. Yes, but there are certain rules for setting up of a school. The rules have to be followed. Okay. For the purpose of getting recognition. Without that, you cannot run a school. Especially if your ambition is to develop a school to provide the best quality modern education. It would require considerable investment. It would require land. It would require expenditure on buildings, staff, etc. In other words, you are running an enterprise. It is a social enterprise, whatever it is, charitable purpose. It can be a charitable society also, registered under the particular state law. The point is that the drill has to be followed. There is no escape. Now the issue of bribery. Here, what is the legal position? The hand that gives is as guilty as the hand that takes. Therefore, an NGO cannot be a part of this game. And corruption cannot be accepted as a part of the game. Therefore, the proper course for the NGO should be to bring it to the notice of the appropriate authority about the wrongdoing, rather than trying to compromise it. Now, this particular problem of corruption is a very old problem. It has been there throughout history. In fact, I would suggest you go through some of the articles I had referred elsewhere in the ethics course in Mission IS by Dr. P.C. Alexander, who was Principal Secretary to the PM. I might give you the references. My own feeling of this, on this subject, is why people take recourse to this. I was not being able to find answer till I read the Holy Bible. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, you see the story of Adam and Eve, the forbidden fruit. God was displeased and then served a punishment on Adam and Eve. This punishment holds key to understanding of the incidence of corruption in humanity throughout the world. God said, and I quote, "Thou shalt earn your bread by the sweat of your brow." Which means, till then, you have been eating whatever is available. But now, you have to work. Thou shalt work to earn your bread by the sweat of your brow. Which means, my interpretation is this, that working hard is not a part of human nature for income. Man would very much like to earn without any work. It is a human weakness. Otherwise, how do you explain people buy lottery tickets, knowing fully well that there is no chance of winning? But in Connaught Place, you will see large number of lottery, selling agents doing brisk business. Why do people buy lottery? Because it is wonderful, it is heavenly to earn money without doing any work. Second, why rich and educated people go to race course and bet on slow horses? which are not likely to earn. Gambling is a passion. In Calcutta's Chinatown, in my younger days I saw a China man, if he gets half an hour lunch break, he will eat for 15 minutes and 15 minutes he will playing mahjong. There's a game called mahjong. All over the world, you find gambling dens are full of people. They're all educated, well-to-do. Why? This lure for extra buck without any work is a matter of great pleasure and satisfaction. Corruption is rooted in this particular instinct of man. So remember the punishment of God. And therefore, strict laws have to be enforced because, for two reasons. A government servant is lucky enough to be in the organized sector. As I said, only 8% of the people of our workforce is in government. He has got the job security, he has got so many benefits, pensionary benefits, health security, so many things. Why is he taking this step? He must be a gambler, a desperate person. And therefore, it should not be tolerated in any manner. And an NGO particularly cannot be a party to this kind of practice. So that should be made very clear that he should try to get his clearances through the normal channel and seek, by taking advantage of her US background, her fluent English, she should be able to approach the collector and other high officials and impress upon them the need to clear her case quickly. That should be a kind of positive approach, not to compromise with corruption. Okay? And the strategy of many developed countries of treating NGO sector as a third sector of the government to bridge the gaps in provisioning of certain services in health, education. In Europe particularly, it is the old age care. In countries like Sweden, etc., it's primarily left to the NGOs. The old age homes are run primarily by the NGOs. So that kind of partnership between the government and the NGO sector is an effective way to address this issue. Okay? We have covered all. Any question of a general nature?
What should be the structure of answer of a case study? Structure, suppose introduction, what introduction we have to write? Directly we have to go to the answer.
You see, first you have to make up your mind on the conclusion. What is your point? You should make up your mind. For that, as I said, you scan, underline the facts in issue, okay? And find out the core, the main thrust of the matter. Address that and give evidence of your having thought over this matter and come to a conclusion. The idea is to see that you have applied your critical thinking capacity and you are able to reach a conclusion. That's important.
In earlier session, actually the sir has explained this very detail. So we have made a small draft of it and we'll circulate it in our group. And basically which addresses you how to approach it. Any other question?
Yeah.
So what is the basic difference between integrity and honesty for public?
Can you please?
So what is the basic difference between honesty and integrity for public service?
There are two sides of the same coin. Integrity and honesty. You see, except that there is something called intellectual integrity and intellectual honesty. It is not only relatable to money matters or influence. No. Integrity means intellectual integrity also. What happens in reality is that while the shortfall in intellectual integrity is not noticed, the deficiency in financial integrity is immediately observed. But in a mature system, as we have in Britain and other countries, intellectual integrity is considered more important. In fact, it is given highest importance. I give an example of the case of Sir Henry Cadogan, who was cabinet secretary during the entire period of Second World War. And he did not write any book about his experience during the Second World War. He held key positions, he attended numerous meetings. But once he came to know that Winston Churchill had decided to write his memoirs, 6 volumes of history of the Second World War that Churchill penned down, used extensively the official materials of Whitehall. If you get to see this first volume of Churchill, you'll see that he had quoted from official sources. So Sir Henry Cadogan was a party to all important decisions taken. But he did not write anything. Not only that, soon after he retired, Churchill asked him, Henry, how about going to Canada as Governor General? He said, Winston, I have better things to do. The Churchill asked, what? He said, playing tennis and golf and looking after my neglected wife for the last 5 years, and of course fishing. This will be enough to keep me occupied. He did not accept any post-retirement offer of appointment. This shows a level of intellectual integrity rarely seen in this world. A most remarkable civil servant. So, and one example of intellectual integrity, suppose there is a communal problem. And as the magistrate, you give a report not on the basis of facts. That will be a case of lack of intellectual integrity. If your report is biased, then it is evidence of lack of intellectual integrity. The consequences of that might be even serious, more serious than any other type of, misadventure. Therefore, in civil service, intellectual integrity is equally important. Dealing with, say, Dalits, minorities, dealing with cases of people who have expressed a different kind of political views. In insurgency-affected areas, taking a view based on empathy for the poor, rather than looking for a military solution of the problem. As Prime Minister said, Gali or Goli, say, hame wapis aana chahiye. When you have to deal with Kashmir, you have to do something more. But that shows the need for an intellectual integrity based on the larger, the more sacred values of the Constitution and the polity. So both these are equally important. Right? Any other?
Sir, since you was a part of the system for a long time, right? So, please tell your somewhat experience related to government.
Well, let me tell you, a sense of humor in difficult situations is a great asset which one must cultivate. See, I have worked in Assam and parts of Northeast, and let me just narrate one of my very distinguished colleagues who is no more. He had a rare quality of professionalism and a sense of justice and a sense of humor. You see, it was sometime in the afternoon in 1969. I was summoned by the divisional commissioner He's no more, Mr. Bhupender Singh Sarao, a Sikh officer of 1952 batch. So as I entered into his room in the afternoon, a large body of people, agitated, they buzzed into his room, with some petitions and the lawyer. They wanted intervention of the divisional commissioner on their representations, a land dispute or something. So Mr. Sarao was unnerved, completely unmoved by the surroundings. So the lawyer who came and submitted the petition, so he looked at it and said, "Gentlemen, I don't apply my judicial mind in the afternoon." So this advocate, whose brother was a minister in the cabinet, he was a bit perturbed. Say, "Your Honor, may be pleased to tell us why?" He said, "I mentioned it very clearly that I do not apply my judicial mind in the afternoon. Please come tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And I will dispose of the matter." After they left, they asked him, "Sir, a grave distress, a situation of some importance, etc." He said, "Look, ex parte orders means without hearing the other party, if you pass an order, is normally an act that should not be done. Number one. Number two, had this matter been so very urgent, he could have come in the morning. Why did he come in the afternoon?" Now he was keen to get an order to tell people that I am connected with so and so person who is an important political figure. मैं afternoon में ये काम करवा लिया. In normal course it could not have been done. I have got an ex parte order. So his decision, at that time I didn't know about John Rawls or anybody, he said this decision of passing an ex parte order would have been violative of the basic canons of justice and fair play. Second reason, she said, that as you know, before lunch I take my gin and tonic. So in the afternoon, I normally would like to deal with simpler administrative matters which you might have brought. So the matter ended there. It is this kind of maturity and anticipation capacity which are important. And that will stand you in good state. The other example I have in mind, when I joined service in Mizo Hills in Assam, way back in 1968, early 68, when there was a state of insurgency. The Mizos, a section of the Mizos declared that they are not a part of India. They would be free. They are always free, they have been free, and they will be free. This was the slogan of Poo Laldenga. And the whole district was up in flames, arms. So Mr. Natarajan was deputy commissioner, so he asked him, "Sir, there's struggle in Vietnam. Why not? These people are demanding freedom." He said, "Yes. Have you read the Gazetteer of Assam and Eastern Bengal? There's a chapter on Mizo Hills. Please read." Then I read that chapter and I found how this area, which was a part of Chin Hills, was made a part of British India, a part of Bengal, and then transferred to Assam, etc. In 1897, it became a part of India. Then he said that, okay, so our relationship is only 50 years. Fine. What are the demands? And what is the basis of their demands for independence? It was based on, when I read their programs, myths. That it is floating on oil, it is floating on gas, that India is trying to do this or that. Then we came to know that this whole thing was inspired by Pakistan. East Pakistan was very much there. So, therefore, he asked me that it is a case of people being misguided. coming to think of it. But you have to counter that by your positive action of empathy, be nice to them, and cultivate the middle class, the educated people. And we interacted with them. Later when I went to a place called Saiha, it's just close to Rakhine, in fact not far from Rakhine. Then I found that they are a highly intelligent people, interested in games and sports. And the youth could be influenced, not by any direct approach, but indirect approach, by distribution of materials, etc. And gradually a movement for peace and reconciliation was organized, which led to cessation of hostilities. And today, the per capita income of Mizoram is higher than that of Punjab. And this small state of 10 lakhs of people had produced the best football team in India for several years. In every indicator of human development, you find Mizos are coming up. So I would say, with a lot of pride, that my association with restoration of peace in Mizoram is one of, I won't say achievements, one of the things I take a lot of pride in. So in life of a civil servant, in daily, you will come across a lot of situations like this, where the ethics that you have inculcated, the culture that you have developed, the curiosity part, if you have cultivated, it will help you to understand the people and do your duties properly. That's, I found it most rewarding of all kinds of alternative occupations that I might have had. No. And working with the politicians, they get fun. See, it is not that there's a kind of a collision. No. There's a give and take, in the sense, psychologically, when you know a person, you sympathize with him, but you must have a sense of humor. See, one of my friends told me his experience that a MLA who became a minister met him and he was not looking particularly very happy even when he became a minister. He said that I should have been given a good department, but I was given a bad department. The definition of a good department and a bad department, I leave it to you to understand and interpret. So basically, a kind of partnership develops through association with various committees of the legislature, parliament, etc. It is not a us or them syndrome. It has to be a cooperative partnership. But it means tightrope walking. But if one is not bothered about his own personal ambitions, it is possible to walk on tightrope, retaining your integrity and enhancing your ability at the same time. If you read Ranjit Singh's book, A Life with Wildlife, it is the memoirs of an ideal civil servant. Thank you. I've taken a lot of your time, but I wish you all the best. Oh, yeah.
Government is building a very big, like Mahalia Dam, even lakhs of people are countered. So वो भी तो जरूरी है.
वो भी तो जरूरी है. एक बात ये है. Question is that whether the site of that particular dam was selected purely on technical considerations, or whether human aspects were taken into account. You see, the site of the dam is often selected purely on technical grounds, regardless of the human consequences. That should be avoided. That is, we should select a site for dam which would cause minimum suffering. You see, this is very important. If you are a technical person, you want to locate your dam at a place which is most suitable. But that might cause maximum damage to settlements. Why should you do that? So you have to trade off. This is where a generalist is important. Yes? Yes, but fortunately in the state that I served, in Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, there was no such threat of transfer. All places are equally good or bad. Therefore, it made no difference. I didn't have this problem. Lucky with, yes. You see, though India is one country, each state has its own political culture. And it has developed its own administrative culture. I'm talking about the IAS and other two subjects. But then there's no choice.
So what to do in that situation?
Manage the adversities as well as you could. You see, again, to quote my Sikh boss, he said, I am always happy when I get transfer. Why? Because I get advance pay. You see, 1 month's advance pay is given when you're transferred. He said, Acha hua, I got advance pay, what is the problem? One should not bother about it.
No, like we get to, like women mostly get threats.
You see, but there are ways to deal with these threats also. Yes, but the threats can be managed. Proper action should be taken. Why not? You see, there are other types of problems. Nowadays, of course, I don't know, they exist. People used to send anonymous letters to the government. There's an industry, regular industry in some states. This officer is so good, etc., not bad, etc. Everything they'll write. But then, they will send you a copy for your information also. Sometimes it is most amusing. But that's a part of the game. Remember one thing, in a democracy, a public servant, a government servant, he represents the government. A subdivision officer represents the authority of the President of India. Because in that capacity, he takes the salute on 15th August. That is the responsibility. And one should be aware of that.
Sir, it has been a nice experience for us.
No, it's my pleasure.
Sir, because normally we are getting the kind of thinking about the syllabus and the contents and all those things. But the way he asked, I was about to ask the same question about your experience and all those things. And I'm basically from Assam.
Okay, really? Which part of Assam?
I'm from Guwahati itself.
Ki naam apna? Are you Assamese?
Yeah.
You
So
know?
I was just listening on your experiences of Northeast.
Hmm.
And I was just thinking in my mind that how amazingly you have served the part of country which is normally in our mainstream India is said to be the disturbed part and all those kind of hue and cries. So
No, it's not at all disturbed that way. In fact, other places are more disturbed. You see, the question is that, as I said, every part of India has a different administrative and political and social culture. And the administrative traditions are different. So one has to adapt to it.
Sir, yesterday, like my brother, he's a psychologist.
Mhm.
He took one seminar of IPS officers in Madhya Pradesh. So like from 7 IPS officers who are very young, like us only, 26 years, he found 3 of them were distressed. मतलब क्या बोलते हैं, depressed.
क्यों? Why?
उन्होंने वो खुद आके बताया कि सिस्टम में इतना प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है, and they are like 1 year they served in a probationary system, and 7 में से